I really started seeing that perspective, and I put a lot of value on like what was I doing and how did that look, rather than prioritizing how did things feel for me? Am I happy doing what I'm doing? And so that shifted me from living from the outside in to living from the inside out. It taught me that everything that I need is already inside me. It taught me that like home is a feeling that I create like inside, and it's not something that I'll necessarily find like from searching to be somewhere.
Hi, I'm Kim Tolson, and I'm the traveling therapist. It's my passion to teach therapists how to navigate online private practices and multiple income streams so they can travel the world. I'm a digital nomad with a virtual insurance-based private therapy practice and a multi-six-figure coaching business. I'm obsessed with entrepreneurship and developing tools that can help therapists live an adventurous lifestyle. In this podcast, I will discuss my journey as a digital nomad. I'll chat with other traveling therapists and help you navigate the complexities of running an online insurance-based practice. I'm so glad to have you with me on this journey.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Traveling Therapist Podcast. Super excited to have Tristan McBain with us here today. She has a really cool story, and she's doing a lot of what I'm doing in my life. So it's cool to talk to a fellow person moving in the same path and exploring this adventurous lifestyle we have. And also we'll talk about it, but adding some coaching in and that sort of thing. So I think that's really cool. Tristan, thank you so much for being here. I always start out and I just say, so how did you go from being a typical therapist to a traveling therapist? Yes. So thank you for having me. I was one of those people that knew pretty early on that I wanted to be a therapist, and I knew I wanted to specialize in couples and sex therapy. So I started college with that being my goal. And in 2014, I graduated with my master's and I started my career. So it's been about 10 years now that I've been in the field. Nice. And I also knew from a young age that I wanted to have a PhD. So for many years of my life, it was a balance of being a graduate student, being a part-time therapist, usually working at least 2 jobs. I'd work one day at one place, one day at another. And for many years, my life was this mix of work, school, sleep, repeat pattern where I'm juggling like classes, teaching, grading, research, writing, publishing, all of these things. And I was always having to be somewhere. There'd be some weeks where I would put between 300 and 500 miles on my car, just commuting. Gosh. Yeah, all of these places that I needed to be. I was grinding, right? And it was like that for many years. But I really didn't mind it. I truly loved what I did. I loved teaching. I loved being a therapist. Like my heart was so at home. But I'm doing all of these things. I was a complete yes woman.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I could relate.
Absolutely. And so on top of everything else, of course, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of academic politics to navigate. But I eventually graduated with my PhD, and my plan was to go into academia. So I wanted a tenure track position. I wanted to teach. I wanted to continue my research. And I figured I would probably have a small private practice on the side. And while I was waiting for the next round of interviews to start for that next academic year, I was full-time at a community mental health job that I had been working at for about 6 or 7 years at that point. I started a national job search. It was going really well. I'd been given 3 offers, and I had several more interviews lined up. And it was March of 2020.
Of course.
Yes. So the pandemic came, and the remainder of my job search was canceled. I suddenly had gone from having all of these career prospects, where's my first academic position going to be, to all of a sudden having 0 job prospects. Yes. And then I was furloughed from my community mental health job. So here I was. It had been a few months since I graduated. So I'm still going through this transition out of being a career student, because I'd been in school forever. And then I suddenly found myself at home for about 6 weeks, and I had nothing to do. Like in my mind, I had nothing to do. I had no clients to see, books to read, no assignments to complete, classes to prep for, like nothing. And so it felt like it was gone, right? Like my life as I knew it had really changed. And so after some time of being home and getting some distance from like everything that had been my life, I started to become really aware of the extent that I had been so burnt out and really had just been in flight mode, trying to stay on top of everything like for so many years.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, so very quickly, my entire life, my future, everything that I had spent the last like 10 plus years of my life preparing for, all of a sudden it was very unclear of what the future held. And that had never happened to me before. I was always one of those people that knew 5 years.
Here's my trajectory. No
Yes.
plans for a pandemic to come in and interrupt the whole thing.
Exactly. Yes. Initial weeks after the pandemic, I'm home. I'm going from newly appointed doctor to full-time dog fetcher. And
oh my gosh, yeah.
It felt like the rug had been like pulled out from under me. It felt like a loss of some kind. There were parts of who I was that I didn't know what was going to happen with that. I didn't know what was going to happen in terms of the future. And it feels crisis is too strong of a word, but it's the best way I can describe what I was experiencing, which was like an identity crisis. But I think what was really interesting about that time was the crisis actually came because I had this realization that I wasn't that sorry to see it all go. Like the relief that I felt in these weeks of being home and away from these sources of what I was realizing was extremely significant stress. It felt so different, but that was really scary because I truly loved being a therapist. I loved what I did. And at the time, I didn't really know what all of that meant. I didn't know how to reconcile that or how any of it would play out. So that was the catalyst that set everything that followed into motion.
Oh my gosh. Isn't that just amazing sometimes that the things that come out of, I don't know, tragedy, crisis, whatever, like major life upsets. And it's, oh my gosh, look what I've been doing for all this time. I was the same way. It was like 30, 40 clients a week, cramming them in, trying to take vacations. Then I realized I could be online. But then when the pandemic hit, it really did. It was like, okay, we could be locked in forever. Like we're going to have to figure out how to do all of this online or something. Like, how are we going to make money? It's just for all of us. But hearing your personal perspective of it. And then right after you finish your PhD and all that stuff, it's, oh my gosh, how long did you work for that? And then it's, now what do I do?
Yes, a big part of it was a lot of the ambiguity and a lot of the uncertainty because it was really hard. Like I said, I'd always had things planned out. I always had a vision, had some kind of sense of what is the direction I'm going to go. And that really had been gone for a period of time.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So what happens then? You're like in this crisis, but it's, wait a minute, this isn't so bad.
Yes,
this is a good thing.
Yeah. So eventually, like by the end of the summer of 2020, I had pretty much reconciled that I was not moving out of state for a job, at least not right then. But I did still move on from the community mental health job that I had been working. So I started at a group practice virtually. And that was my first experience with virtual therapy. And I loved it. To this day, I love working from home. It is my jam. I love every single thing about it. But there were some problems that I encountered though, because for instance, I'd never worked from home before. So I had no concept of boundaries with like my schedule, right? So I'd see a few clients in the morning, a few in the afternoon, and then a handful in the evening. I was working these really long days. I was seeing 25 to 30 plus clients a week. And I was telling myself that I was okay with it because I was at home and I was enjoying being at home so much. But what I really didn't realize at that time was like my body hadn't had a chance to reset. And so I was still in flight mode and burning myself out just as quickly working from home as I ever did when I was a student or an in-person therapist. And at the time, I didn't really know it. So I'm working and October of 2020 comes along. And this was a really like kind of transformative time for me because I had a 9-year relationship that officially ended at the beginning of that month. Which was really difficult for me. And then about 3 weeks later, I lost my home in an apartment fire. And so during that event, I actually woke up. It was about 3:17 in the morning. I remember the clock saying that. And there were firemen and policemen breaking into the apartment, shouting at me to get out. The lights came on. The apartment was filled with smoke. And
I had goosebumps right now just hearing.
Yeah, it was an incredibly scary and devastating experience. I was incredibly lucky because my actual apartment didn't suffer any damage from the fire or the water itself. It was part of one unit of a 4-unit building. The other units around it were the ones that were most affected. I was very fortunate that I was eventually able to go back and recover my things, but I still was homeless overnight because the whole building was condemned. And it was about 3 weeks before I was able to go back in. There was this event that happened in the middle of all of this because we're still dealing with the pandemic and all of these other things. There was a moment where I was sitting in my car with my 3 dogs. What I had with me was the clothes I was wearing, my dogs and their leashes and collars, my car keys, and my phone. Myself and my neighbors were all sitting in our vehicles, and we had moved them to the back of the parking lot. We were watching the buildings. There was nowhere for us to go. We sat there for about 2 hours just watching the building burn, watching the firemen trying to put the fire out to save our homes. I had so many moments in that where I was faced with, I'm about to watch everything that I have left be taken away. I didn't really know what was going to happen. It was that moment where I realized everything I need, I have with me, right? Like I had myself, I had my dogs. And in that moment, it was such a big moment of my life. I had to make peace with what was happening, that I could lose everything. And I had to make a decision in that moment that if that was going to happen, I would be okay. Like when everything is stripped away, you really find out what you're made of. And that was the moment that I was facing. So I learned something really important from that experience. The changes that happened in my life from the pandemic itself that led to nomadic lifestyle were more logistical. My work literally went from in-person to virtual. But this was the mindset. This fire taught me, one of the things I say that I took away from it is that my only possession is my soul. I really started to see a greater depth of how I've always lived my life and how I saw myself in it. For the bulk of my life at that point, so much of my worth and value had come from things like what I did, what I produced, and how well I did it. And I think a lot of my stress for so long was because I lived from like the outside in. I put value on all of these things that were outside of me, like my degrees, my job, my research, and even things like what other people thought about me or like what people might say. Like I let a lot of these external things determine how I would feel about myself on the inside. And so I really started seeing that perspective, and I put a lot of value on like how what was I doing and how did that look, rather than prioritizing like, how did things feel for me? Am I happy doing what I'm doing? And so that shifted me from living from the outside in to living from the inside out. It taught me that everything that I need is already inside me. It taught me that like home is a feeling that I create like inside, and it's not something that I'll necessarily find like from searching to be somewhere. And so that was the next shift that I went through in retrospect that prepared me for making such a big life change. Because without that lesson, I don't know if I would have ever been brave enough or trusted myself that I could live the life that I'm living now.
Which I really want to talk about that too. But
yeah,
what a profound thing to discover. I feel like I went through a similar transformation, not through like tragedy like a fire, but just putting everything in storage, feeling like we've got to keep all these little things, and because what if, and this is the things are important and all of that, going through that process. And then realizing 2-3 years later, we have this storage unit full of crap that we don't need, I don't care about at all. And really it is each new place that we land, even if it's week to week, wherever we end up, it feels like home because we've just incorporated that into our bodies and ourselves and like our family unit. Me and my boyfriend, when I say we, is what I'm talking about. But yeah, we could be anywhere and just feel fine now. We don't need the stuff. We need something, we'll go pick it up at the drugstore or whatever. It's not a big deal. But not to minimize how tragic it must be to lose everything to a fire, because that's got to be terrible. I hear what you're saying. I'm relating so much. And it really is a mindset transformation that happens when you go through this process of becoming nomadic.
Initially, it felt really traumatic to think about losing everything, but underneath it was so liberating. to realize that I really don't need any of that stuff. It's nice to have, and I can appreciate it. And it allows me to really lean into what I want and not feel guilty about it or get caught up in, do I want this or do I need it? Because what I know is that at the end of the day, what I need to have are the things that are inside, right? Like I need to have that trust in myself. I need to be on my own team, like stuff like that. And I know it sounds like very philosophical, but that truly was the lesson that I took from that fire. And it was so liberating because then I felt, okay, I have everything and I can do anything within reason. Yeah. But it was a very different perspective than ever anything I had before.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
I love how you articulate that. Yeah. Because I think anybody can go either way with that. You lose fire, loss of a relationship, lots of what you had in mind for your career, all of that. You could have really gone the other way with it, really depressed and downhill and emotionally and just spiraling. I think a lot of people could, but you decided to embrace it and learn from it. And now it's empowered you to be right where you are now, what you're doing now. And I want to talk about that. But I love it. I just love that. I really do.
Yeah. It's
how inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah. When everything was broken down, right? Everything that I had been doing was deconstructed. Then it was I had the chance for the first time to really think about, what do I want to recreate without the influences of, say, my parents, well, you have to go to college, or society saying, okay, the next thing is for you to have a house or something like that. It really allowed me the space to think about, okay, if I'm starting from scratch, then I've got me and these dogs. What is it that we want to be doing? Yeah, so I can share more about kind of how making the decision and kind of what came next. After the fire, I continued working. I was at that virtual practice, and eventually I went on a trip in summer of 2021. It was a tiny mini vacation to Hocking Hills, Ohio, if you've ever been
Wow,
there.
no.
Beautiful.
My sister is there right now. Is that a state park?
Yes.
That is wild. My sister, literally, she's on vacation and sent pictures of, I've never even heard of this place, but it's so pretty.
It's a magical place.
Wild.
Yeah. So it was actually my first vacation since 2018. So it was well overdue. Not even just since COVID, but so it was well overdue. And I was very burnt out from just being a virtual therapist during COVID. I was exhausted, but I'm on this trip. And it was one of those quick weekend trips where you get there on Friday and then you leave on Sunday kind of deal. And I just remember having this moment on Saturday morning where me and my partner at the time had gone together, and we had booked a canoeing excursion that morning. And we are in the water and we are paddling as fast as we can because we have this time crunch of, we wanted to go canoeing and we wanted to do this hike and we wanted to go on that hike and we want to go here for dinner. And we're trying to cram all of these things into the 36 hours that we were going to be there. And I just had this moment of being on the river where it was soul crushing to just have waited so long for a vacation and then to just rush through it to get back to a job that was burning me out again. And it just felt so much.
Al is a comprehensive HIPAA compliance solution that helps you manage your practice, meet with your clients virtually through video therapy, manage client appointments and client records seamlessly, streamline your claims process, and communicate with clients securely through Al's client portal. Visit alpractice.com/Kim Tolson for an offer of 50% off your first 6 months.
So we were driving home from that trip, and it was on that car ride home where I said, I wish I could live like I was on vacation every day. That was my thought at the time. But that was the moment where I realized, okay, I don't have a house. I don't have children. My work is virtual. And it's funny because I used to say, back when I was younger, that if I was rich, I wouldn't even own a house. I would just travel from place to place. I didn't even know the word nomad existed, but I would describe to people, this is my ideal life. But I share that because it really was on this level of fortune and fame, wildest fantasy, hitting the lottery. That's nice to fantasize about, but that's never going to happen for me. And so it was in this moment where I had this realization of, holy cow, maybe I could actually make this happen. And that was another very liberating moment because I'm the kind of person that once I decide to do something, like it's done, then it's just a matter of, okay, you work backwards and what do I have to do today to get me closer to that goal? After that, things happened fairly quickly because I had made that decision. There was like a clear before and after. I had decided to start traveling full time and I didn't know how, when, what things were going to look like. I just knew I was going to do it. So about a month after I got home from that Ohio trip, I put in my 3-month notice at that job that I had been working at. My last day of work was in November of 2021. And I left my home state of Michigan about a month later. Just a few days after Christmas, I packed everything that I could fit into my Corolla. If it didn't fit, I didn't take it. And my dogs were included in that car. So I did not have a lot, but I took my dogs and I got a roommate in Denver and I stayed in Colorado for about 4 months. That was my first place that I went and I moved on from there. Even when I took the leap and I quit my job and I had left, I didn't have my practice established yet. I didn't do that until a couple months later. Looking back on it, I don't necessarily recommend that for everybody, but I do appreciate the bravery in myself that it took for me to make that change because I figured it out as I went. And if I had waited until I felt like I had everything figured out, I probably would have never done it.
Totally relate to that. Yeah, because it's too hard to plan for the logistics. And it's more like you have to live one day at a time. I know that's a cliche, but really, you can plan a trip, but things are going to happen every time. Something's going to get canceled or the weather or whatever. Family member you have to come back for. There's something that's always going to come up. So I just love that spirit. Just do it. Just take off. Did you put anything in storage or you were just like, no, I'm just taking this car and the dogs and I'm done?
Yeah, so that was pretty much what I did. I didn't put anything in storage. So at that point, I had moved a few times during COVID. And then with the apartment fire, I was displaced for a couple months while I was waiting for another apartment and stuff like that. So what I owned had dwindled over time. And I really didn't have that much. I think the thing that was hard to leave behind was my plant collection. I had about 40 to 50 plants that ended up going to my mom. So those were the items that I ended up putting in storage, but really my mom just took them into her collection.
Oh my gosh. Oh yes, I can relate to that. I had so many plants that I'd had for 20 or 30 years. I'm like, I love this plant so much. But you find good homes for them. And I know they're still thriving in other places. Yeah, me too. I can relate to that so much.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned a partner for the Ohio trip. If you feel like talking about it, how did the partner come or not go? You mentioned a roommate in Colorado and all this stuff. So did you have to break up to pursue this like passion that you just had to go do this? Or like, how did that go for you? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah. So my partner and I, we've been together about 5 years and we're both very independent people. And so there have been times like during that where like we've lived together and we've lived separate. And even so when we came back from that Hocking Hills trip, the conversation had been like, what would this look like? And so he was interested in the lifestyle as well. And he actually ended up selling his house and we traveled. Sometimes we traveled together and sometimes we would travel separate.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I didn't have to leave the relationship to do this, but I also didn't have to stay within like really firm parameters of, okay, this is what our relationship has to look like. And we have to make all of these decisions together. So I think over time, we found a really good balance with how can this work for both of us and also just overall have the freedom to do what we want to do while also being able to share some of these experiences together.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's such a good message because I run into that all the time, like with the coaching and the traveling therapist course and all of that stuff. That's a huge component. What do I do with my significant other? They want to do this. They don't want to do this. They can't because of this or that, or we have family holding us back. Like all of those things come up when a lot of people don't do it because of that stuff. So I love that message. Let's talk about it. We don't have to have this traditional thing all the time and I can still live the life that I want to live. I love that.
Yeah. And I think that what you're saying about like that tradition is really important. And it was a big part of my story too, because I've always lived a little bit outside of
like society norms in terms. I knew I didn't want to have children from a pretty young age, and I was always pretty vocal about that. I've never owned a house. I never really wanted to do like some of those like more traditional type of things. But I think that is one of the biggest lessons that I've taken away as well, is that I think that everybody has to make their own decision for themselves, and that it's okay if what you want to do or how you want to live looks outside of the norm, because the norm is set. It's there for a reason, and it's set by something or someone. But just because it's there, it doesn't mean that you have to abide by that. If you're able to step back and really think about what's best for me and what is it that I want, it might look a little non-traditional, but that doesn't mean that it's less than. It just means that it's different. Because I certainly wouldn't say that my relationship is like less valuable than someone else's, just because sometimes we spend time apart actually like works really well. So
sometimes it's really good. I can agree with that.
Yeah. And I don't think that's right for everybody. But yeah, my point is just that you have to do what's right for you. And if what's right for you is a little different than what's right for most people, like that's still okay.
Yeah. I love that so much. That's amazing. So where are you now? Like, how are you navigating this now? Are you doing like slow travel in places? Are you like getting roommates for 6 months? Like, how are you making the whole thing work right now in your life?
Yeah. My sweet spot is I tend to stay about 3 to 5 months somewhere.
Okay.
Less than 3 months to me. Like I really like to get to a place and explore it and do all the touristy things. And then I like to do all of the local things, all of the little hidden stuff. And so I find that 3 months, anything less than that, I feel like I'm rushing myself. And anything longer than 5 months, I get a little stir crazy. That tends to be like a good mix for me. And sometimes my partner, he has an RV, but he tends to work camp. So like for right now, he's staying at a spot for 7 months. And sometimes I'm here in the RV, and other times I will go out and I'll Airbnb or find a roommate or something like that. So for example, there was a time where I don't remember if it was last year or the year before, but we were in Vegas, and we were going to be in Vegas for a little bit longer than I was ready to go with the weather. It was so hot. So I ended up going to Portland for about 3 or 4 months. And then we ended up back up after that. Yeah. So that's how I've traveled up until now. So one of the things that I'm doing by the end of this year is I'm actually going to get my own trailer. And yeah, so I'm going to go all in on getting like a vehicle to tow and a trailer for myself. And that's going to be my next chapter. So hopefully I'll have that going by the end of this year.
That is awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. I always love on the different nomadic groups when people post their travel trailers and they have them all decorated and they're just so cute. I love those. I've always wanted one.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see how it's going to turn out and have something of my own to decorate.
Yeah. That's so fun. So do you mainly just stay in the United States? Is that kind of your thing? Or have you gone out of the country and all of that? Or is it?
Right now, it's been mostly more of the U.S. A couple of reasons for that. One, it's been hard for me to travel and like plan travel abroad with my dogs. That's one thing. So my loose general plan is I'm going to get my truck and my trailer, and then I'm going to focus on U.S. travel. And then I'm going to do abroad travel in terms of like actual vacation. So that's the other thing I do is 3 to 5 months in one place, but I'll still take trips. So even like this year, I went on a trip to Miami and Key West. Last year for my birthday, I went to Mexico, and that was my first solo trip out of the country by myself. So I do a lot of solo travel, and that's probably how I will incorporate more of my international travel over the next couple years, like the foreseeable future. But down the road, big picture, when it's just me, when my dogs someday are gone, I've thought about doing some nomad travel abroad. So we'll see what happens, because I definitely think that's in my future. I'm just not sure when.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fun, though. I just love the not even knowing. This is my general loose idea where we might be, but that could totally change. At least that's how our lives have gone so far. It's, will people be here for 6 months? No, we're not even going now. It's totally changed.
Yeah, it's funny because I've had some friends in the last couple weeks message me and they're like, how long are you going to be where you're at? When's the next thing? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. And they're like, where are you going? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know yet. And they're like, this doesn't sound like you.
That's great. I love it though. Yeah. So what are you doing practice-wise? Is it private practice, the sex therapy, and I guess using your PhD in some capacity, I'm assuming, in private practice?
Yeah. So in 2022, I started a virtual private practice where I specialize in couples and sex therapy. So that's been an amazing adventure. I really can't underline enough how much I love being a therapist. I just love the work that I do. It's so fulfilling and so enriching for me. Yeah, I've really been putting a lot of my heart and soul into building my practice over the last couple of years and getting that to a place where now I'm offering couples therapy intensives. And I'm actually planning for 2025, I'm actually going to niche my practice down even more to just working with couples. So right now I work with individuals as well, but my goals for my practice are to really niche down, do great work with couples who need the help, and continue to serve my community in the state of Michigan.
It's amazing. Yeah. And you're probably just such a fantastic relationship therapist because you have such an open mindset around setting the boundaries, how you need to set them to make the relationship still work. So I'm sure you're a very good role model to your clients. Yeah. I think that's really neat. So I'm assuming with the Michigan license, you can be anywhere as long as your clients are physically in the state at the time of service. Is that how it is for your license? Okay, perfect.
That's correct. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Nice. So let's talk about the other part of it, because you're also branching out into the coaching world, the nomadic coaching world. So I'd love to just talk and share about that a little bit too for everybody listening.
Sure. So this year I founded my coaching business, which I'm really centering around this newfound passion that I've developed for helping other women therapists build their own virtual practices so that they can travel as they please, essentially. Pieces of the work that I do really focus on helping you build your virtual practice and then also that mindset piece. And so I talk a little bit about like the travel and things like that, but there's so many personal factors that can influence how somebody travels that the coaching I do really focuses on, all right, what's the mindset that you need and how can we set you up with your practice or your business and essentially income that can be consistent over time, regardless of where you're at? Or are you just doing extended travel versus are you living nomadically? Or maybe there's a change. You want to be closer to family for a period of time. All of these things are possible with the program that I offer, because at the end of it, what you have is you have your practice and a mindset that is going to, help you just really indulge in more of that travel and have more of those other pieces that you want. So I think of it as this idea of funding your dream life of travel with work that fuels your soul.
Yes.
With work that you are empowered by and that you love to do. Because I really found that is something that's true for me. There's been this very beautiful relationship between like how I've built my practice and my work with the lifestyle that I'm living, because I feel so invigorated and just alive with the lifestyle that I have. And I know that translates and comes into my work with my clients. Without that, that's my lifeblood. Without that, I wouldn't be able to do the lifestyle that I'm so passionate about and that I love so much. So it really just cultivates a passion for what I'm doing on both sides of it. And that has truly been a gift that I did not experience before, that I've had and that I've created for myself at this point. And that's part of my passion with sharing that with other therapists and helping other women who are inspired by that and want that for themselves.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Yeah, it's so good. So how do people find you if they want to work with you or talk to you more about your program and what you have to offer to help other female therapists or even male therapists if they want to do this life that we're living? Yeah,
absolutely. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is iwanderwhatsnext.ll.
Oh, so
that is, yes, that's the name of my company. And then I also have a Facebook group And the Facebook group is called The Nomadic Therapist, Build Your Practice for a Life of Ultimate Freedom. And you can join this group if you are a woman therapist who's interested in the lifestyle. You want to keep in touch with me. Group, I do a live every week. I have free resources available, and it's really just a resource for other people who are curious about this lifestyle and they want to know, how do I build a practice that's location independent so that I can travel more?
I love it. Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing and coming on and talking about this. And you guys go check her out, and we'll have all the information in the show notes if anybody wants to look in there and find more information about how to reach out to Tristan. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Traveling Therapist podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to thetravelingtherapist.com, where you'll be able to learn more about my journey, the courses I've created for you, and other exciting resources to make your dreams become a reality. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your traveling therapist friends, subscribe to the podcast, and if you love this episode, please leave a review.